Ann Bowman, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Has anybody ever felt like, wait, I never signed up for this? Well, stick around today and you're going to see how God really shows up in Ann's story. So, Ann, what kicked off your journey and what was tough for you?
I raised my children in a church which had a number of missionaries come and visit. They inspired my kids growing up. When they were in high school, I always wanted them to go on a mission trip before they graduated so they would just understand the world and everything. And so little did I expect that not one, but two of them would choose to go into full time overseas missions. And one of them even took three young children with them. So when that happened, I had felt like, I am a committed Christian. I've given my kids to the Lord, but it was truly tested when they began planning to leave, packing those bags. In my mind, I kept thinking, this cannot be happening. But they did move forward and they believed and knew that God had called them to the other side of the world. The one with the three small children, one was a newborn, four, two, and a newborn, and they went to a third world country, which is lacking so many things. No hospitals nearby. I mean, it was frightening to think of them being there, and I had so many like, are you sure this is what God wants you to do? But we packed those bags. We went with them to the airport, and I just put on this bright face. And I wanted my grandchildren to see me smiling and loving on them. And as soon as they turned the corner down the security lane and I couldn't see them anymore, I made my way back to the car and just really started crying and everything. I had a 4 hour drive home and I had to pull over and just say, Lord, I cannot do this. It's like, do you ever feel like sometimes, Lord, you've asked too much of me? And this is the point I came to. Along with that, as I got home, I felt a lot of shame because as a Christian leader, women's leader in my church, I felt like I should be able to roll with this and just do this joyfully, but I couldn't. I was just filling up with grief and fear, and I wrestled with God. But
Mhm.
who wins when you wrestle with God? And He was so patient and just very sweet to me and began speaking to me through scripture about uh, trusting him, about letting my children go. And he spoke to me a lot through Mary, the mother of Jesus, and how from his birth on, people would speak over him amazing things, and she would always treasure these things in her heart. And I go, Mary was just like me. She wanted to hold Jesus close and protect him, and she loved having that little baby and wiping his feet and nose and just being the whole mother. But yet at the same time, the cross was ahead, and
Mhm.
God knew that as much as he'd given Jesus as a gift to her, she was going to have to let go of him in the end, and to something much more difficult than what I was going through. But I saw God's compassion for me, and like not to be ashamed, but just to release it to him and allow him to strengthen me.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Yeah, I see that. As we spoke before we got on, I have a daughter that lives in Australia, and when she was leaving, it was really hard when they live so far away. Like you can't like rescue them in a sense. Like if they call you and hey Ma, can you come over and help me do this or that, or they're somewhere else and you can't help them. So that it is a hard place to be. But for me, my daughter isn't in missions, but I know that because of what you have given up, and it's a huge part of your life,
it is.
and you have grandchildren, and hard not to see them as well. And do you get to see them at all?
I do. It's been about 12 years now. So in the beginning there was the wrestling, and then God, I talk about in the book how I did an about face and I became like their biggest supporters, and
Oh.
I began to delve into how to support them. And I feel that I have another daughter that's single and she's overseas as well. I miss her too. But I do go travel. I think it's important to go if you can,
Mm.
go and visit them where they're serving. You will
Yeah.
understand what they're going through. And once I saw my grandchildren there in the neighborhood and they share with their little neighborhood friends, I realized this is where they were meant to be.
Hmm.
This couple, these children, they have a very effective ministry there. But as we went along, and I think you went through COVID, so you get them on the other side of the world, and then COVID occurs. Who could have imagined that that little 2 week cold was going to turn into a year and a half of lockdown in some places, and
Hmm.
so you're separated there, and you struggle with that. And then we went forward. There was a military coup in that same country, so it was a good thing that I learned to surrender them to the Lord because I was going to be tested moving forward over and over to trust him again.
Yeah.
But yes, I visit them. My kids have made me brave. They have pushed me out of my box and my boundaries, and I've gone places and I've shared with their neighbors because when you come all the way there, everybody clamors in and wants to meet you. And why have you come? And they're very, very open to stories of the gospel. If you'll share.
Yeah, oh, that's so nice because you get a lot of pushback in the States, right? Because over there in other countries, they're so much more receptive because they don't have the whole technology thing
Right,
overcoming them, and they live
right,
in villages, I'm sure, and all that. And so, what are they really seeing and what are they really participating in, except for just
right,
maybe like the calmness and goodness of God, right?
right.
So hard for you
Mhm.
even to know that, some of the kids that your grandkids were hanging out with, that one day they weren't coming back. Do you want to
Right.
talk about that a little bit?
As the girls grew up in the neighborhood, they had the idea to have a little Bible study with the little girls their age. And this was in the country they were in. This military coup just crippled the nation. There was poverty everywhere. And they were having this Bible study. And then one by one, my granddaughters were 9 and 12. And so one by one, the girls were their similar age. These girls would disappear. And so didn't come back. And this one, so their mother went down the street and was asking. And then they would say, they've gone to work.
Mm,
Well, trafficking is just rampant over there. And I think they were faced with poverty. They couldn't feed all their children. And a person comes along and says, I can feed your child. Let me have them. And so I think we talk about the things these kids overseas face, the TCKs, we'll talk about third culture kids. And one of them is to understand what trafficking it is very early age and that it happened to their friends in their neighborhood.
hmm.
So that was difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how did I'm sure it was difficult for, your daughters or what
Yes.
to explain where they might have gone,
Right.
after all that, and
Right.
how did they understand that, you know?
Right. It's just made them very sad. They know there's children in their neighborhood who never get to go to school. Some of them don't have enough food. There's other children up in the mountains. When COVID hit, they're called COVID orphans. And they literally, there might be a couple of very old people up there, but these kids are scavenging roots and berries and surviving however they can. And there's such a need there.
Yeah.
And you have the love of Christ there in the country, and you can't do everything, but it hurts to see small children lacking like that. And my grandchildren were aware of all that. So
Yeah.
yes.
Well, as you're talking, I'm thinking like, why tell people why it's so important
Oh.
for people to support missions and through church.
Oh my goodness. Yes. I've done studies. I've read some articles about what the number one reasons are that missionaries leave the field. Most of them leave it about 7 years after they've learned the language and everything. They get discouraged. They struggle sometimes. I'm sorry, with a sending organization or team members. And another big factor is they don't feel the support and encouragement of their parents.
Hmm.
And this was one of the reasons I wrote the book. I was serving with an organization called Thrive Ministries out of Denver. And
Hmm.
I volunteered a number of times. I've gone overseas and we've held events for women in missions. It's like a spa retreat. We bring in teaching, worship, counselors, and we
Hmm.
just love on these women. And in my small group, I had the young women, and I said, told them about my kids. I said, I think I need to write a book. And they all like said, oh, please write this book. And several said they came from a Christian home, but their parents never fully supported them in what they're choosing to do overseas. So
Mm,
that's very discouraging. So to encourage missionaries, oh my goodness, if you're a parent of one, let God heal your heart and help you to let go of your kids and ask Him, how can I best encourage them? Frequent
mhm,
Zoom calls with the grandkids, emails, let them know they're not forgotten.
mhm,
Absolutely.
mhm,
Um, we can go into when they come home from the mission field. Churches, they do so much, and there's often they'll do have a little home for them to stay in to rest up before they start speaking at church, hold debriefing sessions with
mm.
them. I would like to introduce the concept of third culture kids right now, if that's
Sure.
okay.
Of
So
course.
once my kids left, I heard the idea. They're called TCKs, third culture kids, and I didn't pay any attention to that. I thought, I've raised 4 kids. I got this. But as my children, my grandchildren began coming home on furlough, the first time it was just baffling. They were unusual. They didn't fit into Sunday school and things like that. And we began to do some research and found out a TCK is a third culture kid. So these children are from America. They have an American passport, and at a very young age, they go to another one to live permanently, and they don't fully fit in that country where they've gone, and then when they come home they don't fit in there, and so these kids growing up can have this feeling of not belonging. They live in a third culture, the one in between.
Mhm.
I It's a mixed bag. I tend to think it's really wonderful because I look at my own grandchildren and oh, I love the way they embrace people from other cultures when they're in the States. They're the first ones to walk up to someone in the grocery store and just engage people with different cultures, compassion on people who are handicapped. I think so many of us here in the States, we're afraid of people from other cultures. We're afraid to talk or whatever, but they just plow right in and they love them so well. On the flip side, TCKs, and this could be military, diplomat, we're talking in the realm of missionaries, they encounter a lot more trauma in childhood trauma than most other kids do, say in the States. And I know for mine, it was saying a lot of goodbyes. In the beginning, they had language barriers, and the youngest three. There was another little one. There were three that went, and now we have four. But for the youngest three, their first language wasn't English. It was the country where they had gone. And when they first got there, when you are a small child, a 2-year old, and you're put with a babysitter who you can't communicate with, there's a certain amount of emotional trauma that goes on. It just goes with it.
Mhm.
Um, they went to school and they were made fun of for being white foreigners. So, boy, that's a flip here in America. And they had to learn to stand firm and love regardless of how they were treated and
Mhm.
everything. They come back to the States and they just don't quite connect in the church culture with the Sunday school or the youth group or whatever. Um, and but when they came back and they had the debriefing, that was their second big furlough. A debriefing takes place with a counselor. Ours was by video. I got to help because there were 4 little kids and they needed an extra person to help. And I was very close to my grandchildren. But we had a guided sessions for 2 days, and we had some coloring pages. We had games with guided questions to ask, and just to help the kids become aware of this stack of trauma that just builds up inside of them. And sometimes these kids, they're aware their parents are in ministry and they're trying to be so good for the
Mhm.
good of the ministry. And even back at home, they're trying so hard, but they're just kids. They're kids, and
Mhm.
they've had a lot of this trauma. Kids that die over there. My daughter and her husband are medical, and they ran a birthing center during COVID, and then during the the coup because all the doctors quit. And so they were doing that, and they became, it was just in the next building. And sometimes they would go and hold these babies, and then the baby would die in a few days. And they, we are sheltered from that here in the States. We're not always aware, but they are just right up front. The neighbors came in and they would be talking about the violence in the big cities, and they were just front row and they were hearing all this. The oldest daughter, granddaughter, I asked her what it was like when the coup happened, and she said it was frightening. And I was at my friend's house, and the jeeps came rolling in with the military and the machine guns, and we said, "Oh, we've got to hide." And so they were hiding and peeking out and looking at him. Well, the military was not against my daughter. They really weren't against the citizens, but just their presence there was very traumatic to them. She explained that at times they could hear bombing up in the mountains around them, between the militia and the military. So those are things our typical kids here in the States don't hear. They're not accustomed to. They don't see all this up front. So those are the little traumas. And so we went through this debriefing, and it was amazing what came out. Like sometimes it was a wrong perception about something that had happened, and there were tears. There was a very sweet time as they unloaded. The counselor spoke to my kids every day, and they showed them what was said. Here's what they wrote in a journal. And he said, these two right here need to see a counselor. I would say they need continued care to work with some deeper things. And they did that. They followed up on that. And then he also told them how to have continual debriefing as a family, say, whether it's weekly, monthly, whatever you're going through, have a family time. But now the whole family knows the lingo. They know how to talk about emotions. They know how to talk about de-escalating their emotions and just letting it out instead of knowing they shouldn't let it be stacked up inside themselves. This is important, particularly when they grow into adulthood. And there's so many studies done about adult TCKs, and they go to college sometimes and they don't feel like they fit in. They struggle in relationships. And so the more you debrief when they're younger, they're more prepared. They know what to expect when they reach adulthood. My oldest is 15 now, so we're heading that way, but we're not there yet. But open communication, so important. I would say for your churches, I feel that the workers with the kids, say Sunday school teachers or youth workers who deal with the kids when they're home on furlough, it's really would be good that they have a little bit of training, what to look for in them, what not to expect from them. I was trained in debriefing just because I wanted to understand my grandkids from, it's called tcktraining.com. It's a wonderful organization. It's online, and they have numerous video training. And they actually have one or two that are specifically for churches, just to bring awareness of these aren't average kids. I've heard through my grandkids, and then some of the women I mentor who are missionaries overseas, I've talked to them, and they said that some of the most hurtful things are when they come to the States on furlough, and these parents, they've had this horrendous 2.5 day flight getting home. And then they're talking to people, and then people say, your kids are ill behaved, and it's like sometimes we just need to walk with grace with these missionary parents. They need grace. They need someone to come along and love their kids and to understand a third culture kid. When they're home on furlough, they've just said goodbye again to a lot of people. They don't know if they're going back. They're uprooted. Kids don't do that well. And they will be acting out some crying, some getting angry, and things like that, or just closing up and not talking. So I would love for churches to be aware of that.
And that's where you basically are talking, speaking in other people's hearts. Like, all right, so give me one go-to tip for worn out moms and grandmas.
Give yourself grace. And rest in the Lord and have some fun. I just sit down and read with my grandkids. I love to do it here. And you know what? Many nights every week, because it's 12 hours difference, I call in and I read a book to my two little grandsons. They're the youngest, and they get up really early, and mom wants them to stay in their room. And so I just sit there and read a book to them and love on them and laugh and everything. Keeps close
Mhm.
relationships, and it helps them.
Through all of this, the book that you have, I never signed up for this. Who would this, besides missionary, families or grandmas or moms, who else could this help?
Well, anyone who has had to release their children into possibly dangerous situations, my heart goes out. I'm not the only one who's had to let go, but parents who have to let their children go into the military and leave and go into dangerous situations, that's so hard. And
Hmm.
we just really need, I talk in there about having to release them knowing they're in a dangerous setting.
Hmm.
Just you had to let your daughter go overseas. Goodbyes are hard. They're really, really hard. And the trusting,
Hmm.
learning to trust them. And sometimes my children are walking with God, but sometimes your children aren't walking with God, and you have to release them into that. And just knowing that God's hand's not short, He's there with your child wherever they are as well.
Hmm. So many great, great tips from you today. And thank you so much for everything that you spoke about because I know that it's going to touch someone's heart, help them have a better understanding of what it's like to release children when you don't know where they're going to go or what's going to happen and that trust in God that you have. It's just amazing. Your faith through the fear,
Mhm.
everything that you were going through. We don't even know, but I'll tell you right now you need to get the book and read the whole story because she could sit here for an hour and talk about this because there's just so much to it. And so, you can find Anne at neversignedupforthis.com and in this TCK Family Resources
Yes.
Facebook group. You can go to that
Yes.
Facebook group. So it's
Thank you.
TCK Family Resources Facebook group. And
Yeah.
so, Anne, what would you like to leave my audience with today?
Oh, this is a book of hope. I talked about the hard times, the letting go, but it is a book of hope. And I want to speak to the missionaries, encourage them, the parents of missionaries, and with you plus God, you can do this and you can be a powerful impact supporting your missionaries and your grandchildren as well. So,
Hey, everyone, name one thing you can do this week to lean into Jesus, no matter what. So don't forget to like and subscribe and share for more Christ centered conversations. Visit the website, thecallwithNancySabato.com. Until next time, all glory and honor to King Jesus.